Hello and welcome to Dawn Chorus Writes, a Miraculous Ladybug fanfiction and audiofiction. This is the series, The Truth Behind the Lie, written by Shika, narrated by Dawn, myself, hello, and it's for Shika's Wednesday. So we are on part 20. I hope you're enjoying it so far. Make sure you go and send Shika lots of love for writing it. All her information is listed down below. Make sure you send me some love by smashing that like button. Comment down below what you think of this part and what will happen in the next one. And make sure you subscribe so you do not miss out on future parts and other series and one-shots that are happening at the moment. And I hope you enjoy. Part 20. Adrien's lips had barely brushed hers. Marinette had told him she needed to tell him something and he leaned in. Or maybe she had. It didn't matter. Adrien wanted to kiss her. He had planned the most romantic date she could have ever dreamt of and had played her a romantic song and told her she made him come alive. The urge to kiss him was strong. The tension between them drawing her closer, and the intoxicating perfume of hundreds of roses was muddling her thoughts. But she could tell him how she felt. Even if she had to do it as a puddle of a well-kissed Marinette on the floor of his mother's greenhouse? No, she thought, her latent ladybug confidence roaring to life suddenly. If I'm going to melt, I'm taking him with me. Her hands crept up to grab his lapels and pulled him closer. What is all this? A cold, disdainful voice announced, causing Adrien to nearly fall off the bench and for Marinette to squeak in what she might later think was disappointment. Both were on their feet in an instant, staring wide-eyed at the stern visage of Gabriel Agreste. Nothing! Adrien shouted, his voice breaking on the last syllable. Nothing, father! Nothing? Gabriel sneered softly. I would hardly call a nighttime rendezvous with a young woman in a candle-lit boa nothing. Marinette's eyes widened in surprise at the layers of arrogance, annoyance, and frustration that the voice held, but the eyes. Those steel grey eyes sparkled, not with anger, but with a cruel delight. An icy finger of dread scratched down her spine, and her instincts were screaming. Something was not right here. Father, I can assure you my intentions with Marinette are... Oh, I can very well see what your intentions are, Adrien. His eyes drifted over to her, and she felt herself go tense, as if readying herself for a blow in battle. I wonder how long it would take before you finally recognize the charms of Miss Dupang Chang here. She's been after you for years. Moving swiftly to tower over her, he glared maleficently, leaving her grateful that the keyboard separated them. Miss Dupang Chang is interested in fashion. Have you ever wondered why someone as such talent would be interested in you, Adrien? She is using you to try to get a leg up in the industry, and she has played you expertly. How better to meet all the right people than to be seen with my son? The way he claimed Adrien, the tone in his voice, made Marinette clasp her hands tightly around Adrien beside her. He was trembling, and she couldn't blame him. His father was treating him like a foolish child, and the thought that she would ever abuse Adrien like that made her sick to her stomach. Sir, I can assure you I care very deeply about your son. He is one of my dearest friends, and I... Friends do not tease with kisses, Miss Dupang Chang. She wasn't teasing me, Adrien declared hotly, letting go of her hands and stepping slightly in front of her to stand between her and his father, a protective stance if ever she saw one. If anything, I was teasing her. Oh, really? Come now, Adrien. What would you know of such things? You, on the other hand, and his eyes snapped back to her, are cleverer than I gave you credit for. but not clever enough. Not by half. With a violent sweep of an arm, he knocked the keyboard away, shattering several glass panels on the far side of the room. Adrien nudged her behind him with his shoulder, arms wide to shield her from Gabriel's wrath. Marinette stared, horror-stricken, at the scene before her. This was the man who locked his son away from school and friends for borrowing a book without permission. This was the man who wouldn't listen to his son, declaring that he would just send him off around the world with a girl he hated for months at a time, away from his friends, without asking him what he thought about it. He was the reason Nino had been akumatized and was forbidden in the house. This man was the reason Adrien was afraid of being locked up, had never had a sleepover, never enjoyed a birthday party, or the simplicity of cookies and milk. The man forced his son to perform like a trained dog, constantly expecting perfection while starving him on affection, connection, and family. In that moment, the last scraps of respect she once had for Gabriel Agreste, talent and creativity were swept away in a storm of rage. No one should ever treat Adrien like this. Grasping her clutch purse in her hand, she gave it a tiny squeeze, feeling Tiki buzzing with anger within. If an Akuma showed up, they would take care of it. She would not let Adrien get akumatized, nor this jerk of a father again, even if she did have a strong desire to dangle him by her yo-yo from the top of the highest building in Paris and let him stew for a few days. "Mr. Agreste," she said tersely, her teeth aching from grinding them so hard. "You need to calm down. I'm not sure what the cause of your anger is, sir, but Adrien and I have done nothing wrong, and you wouldn't want to attract an Akuma." Gabriel's laughter chilled her to a marrow, but Adrien tensed in front of her, and she could hear him growling under her breath. "Foolish child. You have no idea what you are playing with. Now, Adrien, step away from that gold-digging hussy at once. She is no longer welcome here." "But father, she's—" "Now, Adrien, or you will be withdrawn from school." "But that isn't fair," Marinette yelled, losing all semblance of patience with the bully. "You are a guest under my roof, Miss Dupang Chang. I suggest you learn prudence and hold your tongue." "No!" Adrien's voice rang out strong and clear, bouncing off the glass walls like a battle cry. "She is my friend. I invited her here. I set all this up, and you have no right to treat her this way." She sighed and placed a tentative hand on his shoulder. "It's not worth your freedom, Adrien. I'm not worth it." "Smart girl," Gabriel purred with a nasty smile that left her feeling dirty. "It is worth it. You are worth it, Marinette." Adrien was trembling with anger now. "She is not a gold digger. She is the only person who knows the real me, father. She sees me and cares for all of me, not just the brand or the money. She is good, kind, loving, and generous. And don't you dare call her a hussy. Marinette is anything but." Gabriel chuckled nastily. "Then why did someone as fashion-minded as Miss Dupang Chang chose to wear a sari to this little rendezvous? An article of clothing easily removed." "Because I bought it for her and she looks beautiful in it," Adrien interrupted, his voice low and dangerous. Marinette felt her cheeks burn at what the man was insinuating. He thought she was there to seduce Adrien? That she was only wanted to be with him for the money and the fame? That he believed that Lila was the trustworthy one and she was the liar? Anger and hurt raged in her chest, the sick feeling in her gut insisting that something was desperately wrong. He scoffed at them. "Such a disappointment. all that excellent education, and you are still oblivious? You're buying her gifts worth more than a pitiful commission could bring her, which she tried to get me to return, and I refused. An easy ploy. Stop acting like a child and obey me, or I shall be forced to confine you to your room until you are willing to see reason. Clearly, they were at an impasse. Adrien wouldn't allow Gabriel to throw her out, and Gabriel was threatening to imprison his son until he complied. She couldn't let her prince be hurt on her account if she could help it. It went against her heart and her instincts as Ladybug, but unless she transformed and carried Adrien away from the horrible man, she was just as trapped in this situation as he was. With a sigh, Marinette lowered her head as if in defeat and eased closer to Adrien. "Not now," she whispered. "Pick your battles, my prince." She felt, rather than saw, him shift in stance. One hand reached blindly behind her for hers, and she took it, pressing the piece of ribbon he still held against his palm. "Marinette," he said, his voice tightly controlled, his back still to her. "I have enjoyed our time this evening, even if it was interrupted, but perhaps it would be best if we said goodnight. It seems I have things to discuss with my father." His voice made her tense for battle. For an instant she was reminded of another boy, another day, another attack. "You and me against the world, my lady." She had failed Cat Noir by not listening to him and pushing him away. As a result, she had failed Paris. She would not fail Adrien the same way. "Are you sure?" she asked, squeezing his hand 3 times and hoping he could understand what she was trying to tell him. "I'm here for you, Adrien, always. You don't have to hide this from me." He squeezed her hand 4 times in reply. "I'm sure, Marinette. Thank you for everything." "Okay, I guess I'll see you at school." She curled his fingers around the ribbon with a final squeeze and edged around the 2 Agrestes to make her way to the door of the greenhouse where Maurice was waiting. The large man's face was his stonest, but she could see worry in his eyes. "And Miss Dupang Chang?" Gabriel replied smugly, confident that he had won. "If you want to keep seeing Adrien at school, it should be from a distance from now on. I do not find you a suitable companion for my son." The feeling of wrongness settled like a stone in her stomach, and she clenched her jaw against the angry words. She wanted to scream at this monster in a candy cane ascot. Instead, she took a deep breath. Turning to stare confidently into those steely eyes, she said, "And if you think your son is an oblivious fool, then it is you who is unsuitable for him, Mr. Agreste." She shot Adrien a swift smile, turned and strode confidently out of the candlelight. The night air cleared her head of the scent of roses, and she felt Maurice take up a defensive position behind her, blocking her from Gabriel's view. They hurriedly got into the car, and she could finally let out a shaky breath. The fear and the anger faded as Maurice drove her home, but the sense of wrongness remained. Ladybug would need to do an extra patrol past the Agreste mansion tonight. Marinette doubted she could sleep until she knew Adrien was safe. Adrien barely saw Marinette smile as she left, her parting shot still ringing in his ears. She had shown great restraint, considering how she had let loose at both Lila and Chloe over his 2 personas, but he could tell she had been hesitant to leave him alone with his father. But this was something he had to do by himself, for himself. He loved Marinette. He had given up so much to make his father happy, and he had realized that nothing he did pleased Gabriel. Marinette, Ladybug, and Nino were the 3 people in his life who had seen him at his best and worst, and of the 3, Marinette was the only one who cared all about him. He loved her, and he would fight for his princess and his chance at happiness. "She seems clever enough," his father said coldly. If she learns discretion, she will make it far in this business. She will go far in whatever she decides to do, Adrien declared angrily. She is brilliant, and you don't know her like I do. Oh, really? That was the amused reply. Girls like her are everywhere. I turn away dozens of them every year. What makes her so special? Adrien took an angry step towards his father. Marinette is thoughtful, considerate, loving, generous, and always helps others. She has probably prevented more akumas than anyone I know. Prevented, not caused. And despite being bullied by Lila and Chloe at school and getting her heart broken, she has never been akumatized. She is amazing, and I will not stay away from her. Lila is the one who spread those rumors about Marinette taking drugs. She has been threatening her for over a year, and now she turned on me as well. She gets all over me on set without my permission, has spread lies that I'm dating her to the rest of the school and at the shoots. She has been saying that you will listen to her rather than her own son. If anyone is gold digger, it is her, and she is a threat to the reputation of the company. If she is already lying about these things, what will she try to get the slightest bit of encouragement? She is a terrible model, doesn't follow directions, treats me with no respect, and is lying, manipulative bully. And the best person I have ever worked with to replace her is the girl you just threw out. A silver eyebrow lifted in surprise, but was quickly followed by a smirk. Is that so? You speak more forcefully about this than you have about anything. Why is that? His father's voice made a fist of fear clench in his stomach, and a cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Everything in Adrien was telling him to run, that the man before him was dangerous, to prepare for the attack. He stared down his father, Plague a warm, vibrating source of courage in his breast pocket. One thing was certain, he could not tell his father his real feelings for Marinette. If he did, Gabriel would pull Adrien from school or threaten her to stay away from him or ruin her future. Because Marinette is my best friend, and she is the best thing that has ever happened to me. I'm 16 years old, father. You can't dictate my friendship or my feelings anymore. A silver eyebrow lifted in surprise, and the lips twisted into a smirk. Come now, Adrien. You don't do all this. He waved his hands at the candles, roses, and the ruined keyboard, ending to fiddle with his wedding ring. For a mere friend. Tell me the truth. The compulsion to obey was like a hook in his jaw, trying to force it open till the words would emerge. I'm... He resisted, but Adrien felt Plague still suddenly, and pressed hard against his chest, right over his heart. Suddenly the pressure eased, and he gasped for air, staring wide-eyed at the scowl on his father's face. I'm a friend! He got out, heart racing and the urge to flee stronger than ever. Must run to Marinette, warn her, keep her safe. I see, Gabriel growled, his eyes narrowing. You are dismissed and restricted to your room, aside from school and lessons. For how long? Adrien asked flatly. It was better than he expected, but not by much. A month. And if I hear Miss Dupang Chang being seen with you at school more than I deem acceptable, then I will pull you out and forbid you to see her again. Is that clear? Rage blossomed in his chest, but he knew it was useless to argue with his father. Thankfully, he didn't know Adrien was Cat Noir. All he needed was an open window and he was free. He couldn't keep him from Marinette. He rubbed the ribbon she had given him on both sides of the mask. She would not lose her knight or her champion. He met his father's falcon stare, and probably for the first time in his life, Adrien let exactly what his feelings be clear on his face. No masks, no perfect illusion, just Adrien, staring at Gabriel with all the anger of a jungle cat, ready to attack the one foolish enough to cage it. He was Cat Noir, and he wouldn't be caged any longer. We'll see, won't we, Mr. Agreste? And with that, he made a stiff nod of his head and made to leave the greenhouse, but his father snapped his finger and held out his hand. Hand over the phone. Natalie will keep you informed as to your responsibilities. Tucking the ribbon into his pocket, he pulled his phone out and slapped it into Gabriel's palm. Turning quickly, Adrien kept his pace steady and dignified all the way to his room, closing the door quietly before stripping off his suit jacket, balling it up roughly and throwing it on the bed. Hey, watch the fur, kid, Plag said, phasing out of the fabric, and followed him as he stormed to his closet. Sorry, Plag, but I'm just... Adrien couldn't get any more words out, his anger devolving into a deep-chested growl that made the bones in his ears ache. Grabbing the first clothes that came to hand, he ripped them from the hangers and threw them to the floor, grinding them under a painted leather shoe. Yeah, I get that, Plag growled in agreement. Your father is losing it, kid. You think he wanted you two to be akumatized the way he was acting? And interrupting your kiss with pigtails? Makes you wonder if he ever had a life. Adrien remained silent, except for the growl, continuing his rampage through the racks of expensive runaway clothes in his closet. He hated them. He hated modelling. All he wanted to do was to run away and hold Marinette. Let her comfort him, to comfort her, and tell her that he didn't believe anything his father said. Tears of anger burned in his eyes. His father treating him like an inconvenience was one thing, but to threaten to hurt Marinette, chances in fashion if she didn't avoid him? To blame the sweetest, kindest, most gentle-hearted person he'd ever known for Gabriel's own vendetta against Adrien's happiness? It tore him up inside. Catching the sight of the blue scarf his father had given him for his birthday 2 years ago, he grabbed it and threw it violently out the closet door. Plag came floating into the room with the scarf draped over his head and an annoyed look on his face. Ain't much, Adrien grunted, slamming his back against the wall and sliding down, his head hanging against his chest as the anger burnt itself out for now. Hey, kid, you need to see this. The Kwame moved in front of him, holding out the scarf. Get it out of my sight, he said wearily. I don't want to think about him right now. This isn't about your father, it's about pigtails. Plag turned the scarf round and showed him the corner. Nearly invisible, stitched blue on blue, was the letter M. Not just any M, but the stylized one Marinette had embroidered on her school bag and purse. Pigtail always signs her work, doesn't she? Plag asked. Adrien took the scarf from his paws and ran his thumb over the stitching. The last of the anger faded in the face of Marinette's work. Marinette tried talking to me on that birthday, but I didn't know her well enough then to really listen or understand her, he said, rubbing the scarf against his cheek. She was so nervous and she jumbled her words. Something about a gift? He sighed, looking at her signature once more. Natalie must have switched the packages. Either that or she forgot to get me a present from him and took advantage of Marinette. His head ached and he suddenly found it hard to breathe as 16 years of identity and family came crashing down inside of him. A child, alone and isolated with only Chloe and ambitious adults for company. Chloe, who was as broken as he was and had turned bitter and hard as a result. His mother, whom he had loved with all the power of his heart, gone, dead, after a long illness, the same illness as Natalie. His Gabriel, turning into a cold, distant master instead of a loving parent. The huge mansion that was dead and empty and devoid of laughter and love and life. Who was he really? Who was Adrien Agreste? Was he the image of perfection that man had crafted? Cautious, restrained, and isolated? Was he truly Cat Noir? Was he really outgoing and flirtatious and open, but even then not free to fully feel? Or was he only real when he was with Marinette? He could be weak, imperfect, open with her in a way that even his friendship with Nino and Ladybug couldn't compare to. In the midst of her own distress, she had held him and let him cry. She had done her best to give him everything he had been missing out on for years. Birthday parties, presents, pizza and sleepover. It's not fair. You need a hug and I can't get to you easily. What are you gonna do, sweet? Tear down my walls of my prison with your bare hands? Do you want me to? Would you if I asked? Without thinking twice, I would do anything to make you smile. The overwhelming emotions and the memory of her words made his chest tighten as he gasped for air, desperate to fill his lungs and the silence, the pounding of his pulse in his skull. The closet now felt too small. For all he could park a car in it. The walls were closing in and he couldn't breathe. Come on, Adrien. I know it's all too much, but I need you to breathe for me, or you're going to pass out, Plag said worriedly, curling himself against his chest and purring loudly. Let's go for a run. We need to find the bug and tell her what happened. Maybe check on Pigtails too. The purring eased the ache in his chest a little, releasing the pressure that prevented him from drawing air into his lungs. Yeah, he gasped, finally looking at his Kwame since he had returned from delivering Marinette's invitation. Plag, why do you have a ribbon tied around your neck? First of all, this was the ribbon Pigtails gave you earlier. Her favor for Cat. She attached it to your suit and you wanted to keep it. It transferred over. Remember Chloe's bracelet? Adrien gave a half-hearted chuckle. Yeah, I never thought to see you in a bow tie around your neck. Hey! Plag swatted his chest playfully. I'll do anything for you, kitten. Pigtails too. You know that, right? The simple, straightforward word touched his heart. Yeah, I know. Thanks, buddy. Don't mention it, please. Now, let's take that run. And when you find LB, tell her I need to talk to Tiki. You'll both have to de-transform, but she'll have a plan for that. Okay, but I want to change out of this monkey suit first. He threw on a sweater and a pair of jeans with his normal sneakers before joining the night outside. Thank you for listening to part 20. Oh, who wants to take on Gabriel? Me first. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you go and send Chica some love. All her information, all her links are down below where you can read other stories by her and also the Patreon, her own Patreon. Make sure you smash that like button. Comment down below what you think of this part and what will happen in the next one. Why does Plag need to speak to Tiki? Okay, we need to find out that. And make sure you subscribe so you do not miss out on the next part and other series and one-shots that are happening at the moment. And I hope you're all good and I'll speak to you soon. Bye!